Good evening, everybody. This is Progressive Washington Special Edition. I'm Oz. Amber is out tonight. She's busy doing her activism. And I would like to introduce our guest tonight as Tyler Vega, former congressional candidate. Tyler, how you doing tonight?
Good. Good to see you, Oz.
Yeah, so we came on tonight, this special edition. It's been a hot topic today about the superdelegates and the second ballot going into the convention, but I think we want to take a look at what superdelegates actually are and how they could affect a brokered convention. I know that many of you who are engaged that watch the social media programs pretty much have a pretty good idea of what's going on. Tyler, can you expand on what superdelegates are and how they are effective and how they have affected past elections?
Absolutely. There are many interpretations of what they are. One could argue, for example, that they are specifically a device to silence the will of the people. But more practically speaking, strategically speaking, they are people who have that have voting power that is many thousands of times greater than the rest of us. So, for example, in Washington State, there's 18 superdelegates who have the voting power of roughly 180. Is it 180,000 people? Did I just do that math right?
Yep.
It's a lot. So on a national level, it's something like 17% of the vote. So basically, if Bernie doesn't get, or if somebody, in this case, it looks likely that Bernie would be this person, gets less than 50% plus one of the delegates, the elites will get arguably something close to 17% of a swing on the vote, which is crushing. That's insane odds.
Yeah, that is. Now, let's go back to 2016 and the effect that the superdelegates had on that election cycle with Bernie running against Hillary Clinton. Can you expound on that a bit?
Yeah, well, the big issue with that is that it was, first of all, it's undemocratic. One person, one vote is democracy, and superdelegates are not that. And they were brought in specifically to keep us from electing popular presidents. That's why they exist. But in 2016, beyond that, the real complaint that you hear and that needs to be discussed further is that it was used in such a way that was really manipulative. These people didn't have to vote, and the nature in which the information was presented really lent itself to some kind of it's just really disingenuous, and I think that people feel that. And it led to this realization that we all kind of had, really, in 2016, that there are superdelegates and that we don't have an equal vote, that we don't actually have a democracy, even at the level, of electing the candidate through the primary. And of course, that's the only people who are going to get to the presidency. So there's this chokehold that the two-party system has on the people in this way. And from my perspective, it turns out to be a good thing because it's going to get Bernie elected. We have to now create a landslide in order to overcome that 17% deficit and ideally preempt it by getting him 50% plus one of the delegates in the entire primary. And I know I'll just add that throughout all of history, all of when the people rise up, it's always rigged, always has been, maybe it always will be. So you just plan on that, and you have to do it anyway. The only way to beat it is with the ultimate landslide.
The points about election rigging and voter suppression, they're always out there, and it was described to me today again and reminded, as we all know, it's kind of a fear tactic to help suppress the vote, and that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. It's not a fear tactic. It's more of showing what we're up against once again. As in 2016, you had virtually every single one of our superdelegates for the state, and you have kind of a list of those, committed to support Hillary Clinton at the convention as the elections were going on, which in itself is rigging because it gives kind of a false narrative of who is the candidate that she got delegates by these superdelegates all along as Bernie was crushing in some of these states. And when he did win those states, he ended up getting less delegates because they used the superdelegate math out of the gate. Now, this time around, they have stifle or stop the superdelegates from voting in the first ballot in the first round, 500 of them, to the second round if it goes to a brokered convention. Can you tell us what a brokered convention is?
Yeah, and this is something. I mean, we all need to know this, and we need like the country needs to know this. This is important stuff. A brokered convention means that there's no clear winner in the first round of voting. So that means that no presidential candidate got more than 50% of the votes. So, for example, if Bernie gets 49% of the delegates going into the convention, and everybody else gets whatever they get, then there will be a second round in which 17% more what are called superdelegates they're known as superdelegates within the structure of the Democratic Party. They're called automatic delegates. These appointed people represent 17% of the vote can then step in, and everybody can vote for whoever they want at that point. It's a free-for-all. And these people being by far and large, and now apparently some of them are on the record as being anti-Bernie, as the establishment is and arguably should be from a tactical perspective. There's no secret about it. It's always been the case that's the whole game. That's what they're trying to do. So circle back to it. Only a landslide beats the superdelegates. Only a landslide beats the superdelegates.
Well, this is the thing. I was distressed, but in a way, this was kind of a hopeful thing. There was an article in the New York Times this morning, and the title of it was "Democratic Leaders Willing to Risk Party Damage to Stop Bernie Sanders." Now, that's a pretty damning article, and one of the excerpts out of this. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just agreeing with you.
No, the Times interviewed. This is a quote from the article. The Times has interviewed 93 party officials, all of them superdelegates, who could have a say on the nominee at the convention, and found overwhelming opposition to handing the Vermont senator the nomination if he arrived with the most delegates but fell short of the majority. And that when you arrive with the most delegates, is that the same thing as a plurality, or is it the plurality, the most votes from all the states?
Most votes is effectively irrelevant. To arrive there with a majority means you got 50% plus one. That's a majority. A simple majority means that the superdelegates will not vote with, if Bernie, for example, gets a majority of the delegates coming into the convention.
So a plurality is under that majority, right? Plurality.
I mean, I'm not sure if I understand the terminology, to be honest, but
yeah.
If it's within the context, that's what I would think.
Yeah, the plurality would be Bernie showing up with, say, 45%,
right,
and then the other closest two, second and third, would possibly have like 30 or 28%. And to me, going into a brokered convention with that at hand, considering one of the points that people don't think about, it's just not that superdelegates, what makes a superdelegate super is the fact of how much power their one delegate vote has compared to all the states who are allotted by, how big the states are, the number of delegates. So, that kind of math shows that on average, wouldn't you say, I did this in 2016 and I came out with the superdelegates came out with 10,000 times the voting power with their one vote, their one delegate vote versus, each state delegate that comes out. And that's kind of crazy, don't you think? That's the antithesis to democracy in my point of view.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. I did probably about the same time I did the math, and that's how I got into all this. That's why the Bernie-crats were born, and what is now Washington Hour Revolution. And the whole idea was, and something we should also talk about, that 10 out of 18 of our superdelegates in Washington State are elected officials. We can vote them out if they don't do what we're supposed to. We're supposed to audit them, and they've all got challengers. And the usual suspects are all on the list. It's Kent Willem Murray, it's Kilmer here in CV6, Adam Smith, Denny Heck, Jay Inslee,
Rick Larson, Susan Delbene.
Rick Larson is in there. Suzanne Delbene, Kim Schreier, Pramila Jayapal, these are superdelegates, and also the DNC chair Tina Podlodowski, and David McDonald, who's a voice one sees online. And then there are 8 other. I didn't recognize any of the names on the list, but party insiders. They're listed as DNC or DNC members. And but those 10 or actually 11, I would call it, including Tina, are elected officials that we can only hold accountable through our vote. They're going to vote on this stuff. I mean, if it's a brokered convention, they're going to vote on this before we vote on them. So let's keep that in mind, because democracy only works if you actually use it. That's what this election cycle is really proving. This not me, us movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is proving that democracy not only does it work, but without it, it does not work. We're careening towards this oligarchy that's going to take us off of a cliff of death, doom, and destruction. But right here, we have to be the check for the checks and balances.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I know that's why a lot of us have doubled down and really doubled our efforts in this election cycle because of what happened in 2016. And before I forget, going back to this New York Times article, it's so brazen and in your face that they have said they want to. They have overwhelming opposition to handing the Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders the nomination. I take that in this way, and I think Nomiki Konst talked about this today, but I looked at this and they're so open and in your face about this. That tells me that they're very concerned, because they either are testing the water, seeing how much pushback, what kind of metrics of resistance they're going to get back from being this brazen, so open in public. When, again, the superdelegate system, the broker convention is not anywhere near democracy. And for a party that has democratic in their name, that would just about, sink the party if they went to a broker convention, in my opinion, and and basically outruled the will of the people. Thus, by doing this, again, I want to go back, and it looks to me like they're trying to suppress the vote, to get those folks that always say the vote's rigged and it's never going to work out. But we have shown right now with Nevada, and Bernie's basically won the popular vote in the first 3 elections, that's not necessarily going to happen. And matter of fact, I'm convinced that's not going to happen as we maintain the get out the vote efforts, because we're bringing in independents. We're bringing in people who don't normally vote. I mean, the age demographic from 55 on down to 18 is just huge, and these numbers can't be questioned. So all that being said, what's your take on how much of a difference we're going to have in this election with the turnout of the younger demographic, the different, the black and Latino and Asian populace, plus the ongoing phone banking and the machine that the Sanders campaign has put together?
I mean, I think it's going to get us that landslide, and I think it will beat these superdelegates, and I think that will be the greatest win, above even getting Bernie elected or getting, AOC or all these other people elected. We'll get democracy back. Imagine that. Wouldn't that be cool? And my guess is the superdelegates wouldn't survive another 4 years. I don't think they will anyway, because we've got the momentum on the inside, and even if things go sour on all number of levels, my guess is we will win that battle at least. And that, I think that's a fair thing to play for, especially strategically speaking. We have to be real about the fact that the powers that be are so powerfully aligned against Bernie's campaign,
right.
and there's a reason why he reminds us every single time he speaks that it has to be from the ground up. It's because he knows, not only does are these forces to be respected, and what's the word, to be
reckoned with?
To be reckoned with. Thank you.
Right.
I mean, we would be silly to not keep on the radar the fact that others have walked this path and they died presumably as a direct result of that. We can't ignore this reality. I saw a quote that I don't know if it was about this or not, but Kishama says something like, "Your path inside the Democratic Party leads to a tombstone." And I'm like, well, okay, so yeah, we do have to be real about that. Just like like knowing that Ben Kenobi is going to die in Star Wars or something. And why is what has he been fighting for all his life but to return us to a state of democracy and actually make a difference? And so if you take out of it this almost, I think of it almost like a mothball campaign where he knows that on some level, whether it's through foul play or cheating or just the nature of humans, that at some point that piece of the campaign ends. And what did you get after that? You got a mountain of incredible evolution based on democracy, based on the people. And I think that we can do really well by focusing on victories like that, and at the same time as the landslide is the only thing that can beat the superdelegates.
Right. And do you think, I think, and I was wondering if you would agree, that having the eyes on everything like they did in Iowa with the separate app as far as counting the caucus totals, this election, eyes are going to be on everything, voting precincts, procedures, everything. I think that's going to be instrumental in protecting our democracy and being able to vote. I know that California is having a lot of issues in different areas with the ballot, how they grade the ballot with identification. What's the name of that ballot? Provincial ballot, or what do they call that? The ballot. Provisional ballot. Yeah, the provisional ballot, which I want to remind everybody that 600,000 of those provisional ballots did not get counted in 2016, and I've vetted that a couple of times, but I think it's pretty common knowledge. So that kind of stuff we've got our eye on, and that being said, back to your point of if we've got so many superdelegates, and I'm hoping that our Representative Jayapal would be one of those superdelegates that would vote for Bernie, but it's like what's that? 1 out of 8 of them that would not vote for Bernie. I mean, that's great, but it's like the Unity Commission. Nomiki Konst was on that as well, and they tried to eliminate superdelegates completely. But they got rid of them on the first round, but the second round for a broker convention, they still have them in there. And that brings me into a video that I want to show, and it just happened to be Elizabeth Warren that got the question. And I'd like to play this video and then have a little discussion about it in between, and then I'll play the follow-up video. This is courtesy of the National Rational today. Rational National. And let's see. Let me know if you can hear this.
Manager for a software company here in Charleston. He is currently supporting Senator Sanders. Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Hey now, Senator Warren. Welcome to Charleston.
Thank you.
During the Nevada debate, you and every other candidate on the stage, except for Bernie, hello somebody, indicated that the candidate with the plurality of delegates should not necessarily be the nominee.
Uh-huh.
This essentially means the will of the voters could be denied by the superdelegates and the DNC, which is basically undemocratic. And in my opinion, is a bunch of baba booey, to put it politely. Can you explain why the will of the voters should not matter if no candidate reaches a majority of delegates?
So you do know that was Bernie's position in 2016?
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
He won 22 states, so he went to the convention.
That was
for his
Bernie's
voters.
position in 2016, that it should not go to the person who had a plurality.
Yeah.
So, and remember, his last play was to superdelegates. So the way I see this is you write the rules before you know where everybody stands, and then you stick with those rules. So for me, Bernie had a big hand in writing these rules. I didn't write them, but Bernie did. when they were putting together the 2016 platform for the Democratic Convention. Those are the rules that he wanted to write and others wanted to write. Everybody got in the race thinking that was the set of rules. I don't see how come you get to change it just because he now thinks there's an advantage to him for doing that.
Okay, I want to get your take on that. Let me kick the volume back down so I don't destroy everybody. How do you feel about what she said?
I mean, I think it's effectively not. It's just not accurate. The Bernie wing of the Democratic Party came to the table to defeat the superdelegates. We were serious about it. Say we, I was not. I wasn't on the inside track at this time, but they came wanting to eliminate the superdelegate, and to say that he wrote that, was in on that, I mean, is true, but he was in on it from the side of eliminate the superdelegates, and the compromise that was reached from no and yes was second round, and we called that a partial victory, and it was better than we'd ever had before. In my lifetime, there's never been a fair election, so this is the closest thing we've got. We've got on the first round, it's theoretically a fair election, so long, almost, but there's this huge caveat, and of course that was how are we even talking about a compromise to one person, one vote? It's ridiculous, but here we are, years after 1984, to talk about can we have one person, one vote back? And
right.
There's another clip running around about Elizabeth Warren, and I wonder if she's talking about the Electoral College. But it's a similar conversation. Superdelegates and the Electoral College are a very similar conversation. And why aren't, in this day and age, with with the amount of interconnectivity that we have, why are the people not electing the president and all? And the answer is we just need to step up and do it. So let's do that. And landslides beat rig.
I absolutely. Again, this to me is just all tactics as far as being in your face with the possibility of it going to a broker convention, which again would be, I think it would be the death nail for the Democratic Party. Superdelegates have no business in a democracy as far as I'm concerned, and I don't believe. I think one of the arguments that I've heard from people, particularly a chair of one of the counties down here, was talking about how superdelegates are all elected. Get used to these elected officials. If you don't like what they do, vote them out. But again, I've got to say, we don't have the ability to vote out legacy superdelegates, like past presidents and things like that. We don't, as populace, as the public, have the ability to vote out state chairs of the Democratic Party. And, when the money is such a big concern about operating costs for the Democratic Party, and as we see that Bloomberg basically has bought his way into, the debates and drop $300,000 to the Democratic Party itself, and another $800,000 to a Democratic super PAC. He's basically funding the DNC, and that's supposed to trickle down to the state parties, but I don't see that happening. But back to the follow-up on that video. Here's what the history actually speaks, is what Elizabeth Warren was talking about, say, back in 2016 and as early as possibly a month ago. But let's take a look at this, and then you can give me your take on this. But this is actually what she said, her feelings on superdelegates.
Why the will of the voters should not matter if no candidate reaches a majority of delegates?
So you do know that was Bernie's position.
And that was not Bernie's position.
Go to the person who had a plurality. His last play was to superdelegates.
A superdelegate is thinking about going to you, but Hillary Clinton won their state. Presumably they should stick with Hillary Clinton.
Look, there's not a rigid rule, but I think, if you win, Hillary Clinton wins with 53% of the vote. She won Illinois by a point or two, sure. But when a candidate, whether it's Clinton or myself, she demolished us in Mississippi, I think the superdelegates should support her in Mississippi. But when in states like Colorado, and in many other states, Utah, etc., we win the overwhelming majority of vote, I think those superdelegates should go with their state.
You've made a distinction between superdelegates from states you've won, that you think those superdelegates should go for you. So will you not try to convince any superdelegate who comes from a state that you did not win in the primary and caucus process?
Right. Look, this is what I think. If I win, or Hillary Clinton, if that is your point, Hillary Clinton won Mississippi by a huge vote. Should I convince superdelegates there to vote for me when she won that state overwhelmingly? No, I shouldn't. But we won states, like Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, New Hampshire, in landslide victories. And I do believe that the superdelegates, whether it's, Clinton's or mine, states that we won, superdelegates in states where a candidate wins a landslide victory should listen to the people in those states.
I'm a superdelegate, and I don't believe in superdelegates. I don't think that superdelegates ought to sway the election. Bernie had a big hand in writing these rules. I didn't write them.
So we're here at the DNC Unity Reform Commission. This is a panel of 21 people. The chair is a Hillary Clinton person, the vice chair is a Bernie Sanders person, the head of Our Revolution, and then there is 9 Hillary Clinton people, 7 Bernie Sanders people, and 3 DNC chair appointees.
Those are the rules that he wanted to write and others wanted to write. Everybody got in the race thinking that was the set of rules. I don't see how come you get to change it just because he now thinks there's an advantage to him. In most democracies around the world, the person who gets the most votes wins. How about we make America that kind of democracy?
So that kind of threw some egg on Senator Warren's face as far as what she was going through. What do you think of that?
I mean, whatever. It's where she's at, and I get the argument for these are the rules, we're going to play by them. I'm in the same boat. These are the rules, and we're going to play by them, and that's why I keep on circling back to this whole thing. And I nobody gets around to it, I'll do it, but there needs to be a bunch of GIFs and memes saying, landslides beat superdelegates, like good ones. So if anybody out there has the skill to do that, it'd be super helpful. But we do have to play by the rules, and not only do we have to play by the rules, but we have to play by the rules against the rig, just like all popular uprisings in the history of humankind. So as we watch that, and you saw at that time there were 6 people on stage. They were asked this question about the superdelegates, and only Bernie stood up and said, yes, we should have a direct democracy, essentially. And all of them know that that's probably the only way any of them is going to become president. So they're, tactically speaking, that's just a given. What we know is that there's been a lot of voter suppression and outright cheating. Probably, everything under the sun has been done to maintain power in this country and throughout the history of humankind. And
Right.
We just have to keep on working and, keep on waking people up. And in all of these scenarios, I think of it like Aikido. Aikido translates as the study of love power, right? But it's a martial art, and the idea is you're in some sort of battle, and you're only using your opponent's energy against them. So you're never actually striking them. You're just taking their own strike and spinning it around in circles. And,
Right.
As I was listening to your show from some days ago, I kept on seeing this where, Bernie's on the stage in this debate where there's a lot of just bullshit flying all over the place. And he's just able to just kind of stand strong and stay in it. And it appears like Aikido to me, because him just standing strong and maintaining his momentum is this huge win, because we're up against, this, and I'll come back to this whole House of Cards metaphor. The House of Cards is so grandiose and so big and so apparently unshakable that when we see it crumble and he maintains momentum in spite of it, is definitely a win, and it's definitely a powerful win. And you see this momentum continue in a way that it's looking more and more like a landslide, and that results in the House of Cards shaking more and more. They're like, oh God, what are we going to do? How are we going to stop Bernie? They literally have, 10 days? I mean, there are people saying we have 10 days to stop this guy, or he's going to actually transform the country.
Well, we got South Carolina on Saturday, and it's kind of neck and neck between, according to the polls, with Biden and Sanders. And then Super Tuesday is going to be very telling where we're at in the grand scheme of things, because we've got California with their a major amount of delegates, and then we got Texas on top of that, which is Sanders is looking good down there too. What's your feeling about some of the so-called leaders of the Democratic Party, Schumer and Pelosi, and even Hillary Clinton, said the other day that if Bernie was the nominee, that they'd back them. What's your feeling on that? Is the party leadership starting to recognize that Bernie's actually, the contender that's most likely to pull this out if we can maintain what we're doing right now?
Yeah, I think that's one way you could take it. I think strategically speaking, if I was those people, I would be realizing that to not do so and to not say so would be just be on the line of blatant hypocrisy, which many things have been, but people weren't paying attention, so it didn't matter then, and it does matter now. And I think that the truth does that to things. The truth in the form of democracy or in the form of speaking truth to power, which, is really all Bernie's been doing this whole time, is just standing strong in, stumping on the issues, and more and more people are like, yeah, okay, yeah, he's right, and now there's a majority, and we get to do this because we do have a majority, and that's the way this democracy is supposed to work, and that's the way it's going to work, and we're going to restore that being the way it works through this process.
Yeah, I think that his message, his consistent message for 4 decades now, being on the side of the people and all the demographics out there, makes him the most trusted candidate on that stage, as well as one of the most trusted to follow through on what he's going to try and do as president of the United States. I know that a lot of us feel like, hey, we need to show up in force and it's about us, like Bernie says. But what we need to remember is it just doesn't stop at the election or the convention. It goes to the November and then the general election, and then it's not time for everybody to go to sleep. We have got to keep that democracy going, and it's all about us. We've got to fight for the Medicare for all. We've got to fight for, getting out of these wars. The current coronavirus is a big issue that can't be taken lightly. It's having not only a catastrophic effect on health and people dying and, being quarantined, but it's a juggernaut in the making of really knocking the hell out of economies across the world, because so much stuff is coming out of China. And, issues are what I like to see. My point about this diatribe I've got going on is that in this last debate in particular, they didn't focus on substantive issues that were important. It was all pig pile on Bernie because he is the front runner. And I'll be happy to get out of that kind of politicking, and hopefully, do you think we'll have a much clearer vision after Super Tuesday? And for Washington State, we're March 10th. We got I think there's 4 states March 10th. And then do you think that we're going to have a clearer vision of where we stand after that? Because my math, like Nomiki Konst, is that if we do well on Super Tuesday, there's no way that many of the other candidates are going to come close to having the number or the plurality of delegates, and even if they combine them. So Bernie looks like, math-wise, and I'll know more after Super Tuesday, we all will, that he will make that total. And is 1991 superdelegates out of how many available? 45 or 4,100?
It's that times 2.
Oh, okay. So it's times 2. So, the math is on Bernie's side as long as he maintains his front-runner status. And judging from, what polls I've seen, I don't know what you've looked at, and polls are polls, but they've been ringing pretty true so far, do you think?
I only look at Bloomberg's polls, and he's always winning in them.
Bloomberg, yeah, Money Bomb. They should call him Money Bomb, because this is Washington State, and I got this today. Let me see if I can get it in here without my screen going.
Just keep moving it.
Bonkos.
Keep moving it.
But yeah, I've got, the point is I've got these very, very expensive flyers, and it's millions to pepper the whole country with these things. throw them up in the air. And it's Bloomberg. I want to send him back with a nice greeting like "F you, buddy." You know, we're not going to allow a billionaire who is in many ways similar to Donald Trump and far more money, I believe, by far than Donald Trump, to buy this election, to buy our democracy. And that point is that if you really are behind getting rid of that Citizens United, where money is political speech, then you can't possibly even think of supporting somebody like Bloomberg. Wouldn't that be the case? Wouldn't you be the ultimate hypocrite?
Yeah, well, except for that ignorance is bliss. People just aren't looking that close at stuff. I think Bloomberg may buy this election. It would not be that hard to buy a plurality, for example. And that I think is what they're shooting for. All of them really. All five of the other candidates, or all six of the other candidates, are shooting for a plurality, and the DNC has been ever since that deal was struck to nerf the superdelegates to the second round. It's that simple, and that's the game, and the board is set and the pieces are in play.
Well, yeah, Bloomberg, in buying a plurality, it's just the other candidates are taking away from each other. I mean, Bloomberg's taking away from Biden, and Warren's taking away from Buttigieg, and so on and so forth. Do you think that after Super Tuesday, or at least the middle of March, or when do you think we might see some of the current contenders drop out?
Well, of course we'll know more, but strategically speaking, they shouldn't drop out. There's two things at play here. One is that if they nerf each other so much that they're getting non-viables, that they're getting below 15%, and those delegates are kicking over to Bernie, then they're hurting themselves strategically. But if they're drawing any number of delegates away from him, even if it's one or two, they're still fulfilling the goal of keeping him below 19, whatever that number is, 1991, is it?
Yes.
So that's, basically the strategy from anybody but Bernie and Bernie's camp's strategy perspective is to take as many delegates away from him so that he can't reach 1991. If they're successful, the superdelegates will vote. They'll get to 70%, and presumably, if he's getting less than 15% on the way in, presumably he doesn't have 17% more going into the second round. So it's assumed that he does not become president if there is a brokered convention. All data would suggest that, and even though we would all love to see the superdelegates sign a piece of paper that they will abstain, like Jackson Ravens did in 2016. I think that'd be a really beautiful thing, to be honest, and I think we should push for that. I think there's a petition running around saying that exact thing. MoveOn.org has a petition, or maybe it's Change.org, that I sent out to everybody on my birthday because it really matters, And I would like to think that our elected representatives are decent people who might be willing to say, hey, yeah, let's do that. I think the New York Times piece points to the opposite probability, and all history points to the opposite probability. 92 superdelegates is probably, that's what, like a fifth of them or something like that, or no, more like a tenth of them. So that's a 10% sampling of them, and they said overwhelmingly
right.
We're going to vote against them, which we'd expected. That's just par for the course.
Yeah, again, it's kind of, I have to think that's by releasing that or allowing that to get out, it makes me think they're worried. And again, I'm just quoting, I'm coining what Nomiki Kant said today. I agree with her. I think they are worried because, or they're trying to soften the blow in some respects. That could be, but this final stage of where we're at right now is really getting dirty with dirty politics as usual. And I've got to remind everybody, it was dirty when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were running, and it was just two of them. So now with, we've got 7 or 8 or 9 still running, although I have to say, a few of them aren't doing any dirty politicking. The rest of them are. Just the usual, tricks and things like that. But I guess before we get out of here, and we've beat the superdelegate thing as hard as we can, I just want to encourage everybody, the most important thing, and if you agree, is to get out the vote and overwhelm the polls, overwhelm, the get out the vote, make the phone calls. Any way you can contribute, that's the way we're going to do it, because when we have massive turnouts, when we're organized, we will win. And judging from what they're talking about historically, we're having large turnouts across the country. So again, I'm very excited about this. I don't think Bloomberg's money is going to change anything as far as getting out the vote per se, because most people know that he's just another incarnation of a wealthy oligarch. And that being said,
people who want that.
yeah, there's some people that feel comfortable, or they use that weird logic that, well, he's got enough money to fight Trump. And that's not what our democracy should about. It should be about at all. That's just what I'm hoping. But we'll see how that goes. Do you see any? Do you have any inkling of how the current things going on with the coronavirus, or any other possible happenstances? April surprises, anything going on that we might be looking out for?
Well, I mean, there are a number of things that come to mind. I think one of the big elephants in the room is that in the history, in American history and world history, when this happens, the guy usually gets shot. And I think that it would be appropriate for us to be eyes open about everything from that all the way to the other end of the spectrum. You talk about getting out the vote. I read this quote by Al Sharpton just a minute ago, and he said something like, "We're not that stupid," basically. And he's talking about black voters in South Carolina, and I think he's talking straight to Bloomberg, if I'm not mistaken. And he's like, "You can't just come in here and sharp money on us and expect us to not sniff you out. I mean, this is the information age. Everybody gets as much information as they want to engage for. So it's kind of over. And when looking for the surprise in Nevada was the Latino vote came out and crushed it. I mean, that's California. That's going to happen in California, because the people are awake and they can communicate and they do have the information, they do have the education. Like, it doesn't, it's not rocket science, and we now are starting to understand how powerful we actually are. I mean, there are other things that we could delve into. Those things are important. And things like learning to talk in meme and GIF, to get it so small that it fits on Twitter, or that gets through to somebody as it passes the page. So on top of a landslide, how do we create the landslide, and how do we how to say it right, how to allow this evolution to happen gracefully is part of the trick. And I'd love to see it happen much more gracefully than it has in the past. Sharpton was what brought this mindset on was that he was quoting Martin Luther King Jr. in this article that I was reading.
Yeah, it was. He kind of was endorsing Bernie in a way, I believe. I don't know if he's done a formal endorsement, but yeah, he's talking about that. And we aren't that stupid. I mean, the throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Bernie, to me, has just had the opposite effect of what they wanted to do. I mean, the Russiagate thing again, everybody, we're Russiagate weary. I mean, sexism, the sexist thing about calling me a liar on stage with Warren, and the Bernie bro narratives. I think, most,
does seem a bit,
I believe the majority in our group are women, working themselves to the bone to get out there and phone bank and canvas and everything else. So all this stuff, they're just throwing everything at them with the Cuban thing, which in fact it was correct as far as, Barack Obama said the same thing about Cubans and their education and their health care. My God. So, these things are having the opposite effect. So I think if we we keep the superdelegate situation in mind, and we let them know through, like what you're talking about, messaging and memes and things. We're not going to be tolerating that chicanery with superdelegates. This is we the people, and as most of all the candidates have said in the past, especially when Hillary Clinton got the majority, 3 million more votes than Trump, and we ended up with Trump. We're still there. Bernie gets so many more votes than the rest of the candidates in this dichotomy of what we going on with the primary election, then he should be the candidate. So I'm going to let the superdelegate thing lie there, as much as I hate to, because I want to be ready for these kinds of things, but we have to have all fronts covered. We have to have our mind on what we're doing, get out the vote, do what we can to get Sanders elected. Before we close, do you have any ideas or suggestions for a VP for the Sanders presidency?
Oh, I mean, people throw around a lot of names, and I like them, basically all of them, really. There are a couple that in my book, strategically speaking, give Bernie's personal livelihood, his health, a little better insurance. Somebody like Nina Turner. But Bernie he's been doing this so long, and he's so well connected that he could really surprise us on that front. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I expect to be surprised. I would love any suggestion. All these suggestions I've heard, I would support, especially State Senator Nina Turner. But I'm just looking forward to it, and it's almost. I mean, I see somebody posts that every single day.
Right. Yeah, I know. Senator Turner has been very popular. Myself, I'm thinking a state senator, maybe not, but I know that she definitely have a predominant place in the administration. And along with, like her or love her, Tulsi Gabbard, I think she's articulate. She knows what she's talking about, and she's where a lot of us are at as far as these regime change wars and this empire thing we've got going on. I know that Lujan Grisham, I think she's a governor out of New Mexico, might be something to consider, or Barbara Lee. I know he's going to be looking at somebody. He has said, I don't know, he said he was considering a woman of color, and I'm excited to no end to see what.
Younger too.
Yeah, and younger, of course, and that's the thing. He is, he's 78, but he's like my father. My father was sharp as a tack up until the week he died, and he died just before his 91st birthday. He could run like Dick Van Dyke said, he's like 94 years old, and he said, I've got all my marbles. I could run for office today, and Bernie's going to be with us for a long time. So I'm excited to see what goes forward. So I guess the message that I have to people is don't fret about what we can't deal with today, but just work for what we can do today, but know what's ahead. Keep your head up, your eyes open, and the dialogue going, and get out the vote. And your closing words for this, Tyler, and thank you so much for coming on.
Landslide beats superdelegates. Landslide beats superdelegates.
Landslide beats superdelegates, absolutely. And again, that's what we need to do. Let's get out the vote in a very big way. And Super Tuesday is, 5 days away? That's going to be huge.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it was 10, but
yeah.
I think it is this coming Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday, so I'm excited for that. And all the positive, awesome. The positive waves are going out there. And in closing, I wanna thank Uphill Media, our Oregon and now California sisters and brothers over there at Uphill Media, and this is their platform. We are Roar Media here in Washington State, which is kind of partnering up with Uphill Media. Great programming. They're doing a lot. They've got a radio station going on down in Salem. Parliamentary Talk is on the 5th, so on Uphill Media, so check that out with Lawrence Taylor. Everything you wanted to know about Robert's rules and what's going on. It's proving to be a great show. But again, thanks so much again, Tyler. And tomorrow night we're hoping to come on with Amber King and Rhonda Walker if she is available. Amber has not said what the topic is, but I'm sure it will be timely and entertaining. And again, thanks so much, and have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you soon.